Hi everyone, merhaba. My name is Irina, and I'm hoping you're having a really good event so far. I'm a bit heartbroken that we can't meet in person, we can't have the great event that I know Digital Zone is remarkable for every year, but hopefully next year or the years to come, we're actually gonna get to see each other in person. Until then, let's make the best out of it. I'm really hoping that by the end of this session, you will leave with some really practical ideas about how to start your own program that will eventually lead to increasing your visibility in Serp way beyond SEO. So what makes me, I guess, person to talk about this? Well, I've been working on this surround sound program at HubSpot for about a year so far. So I've gone through a lot of the kind of like trials and errors. So I'm gonna try to like save you some time and give you the tips from the things that I've already learned. Aside from that, I'm a speaker and sometimes I blog, especially on the HubSpot blog, so check out my articles there. And if you want to connect, I think the best place where you can find me is on LinkedIn. I reply to all messages, so feel free to contact me there, and obviously on nicairina.com. So, in short, here's what we're going to talk about today. First of all, we're going to talk about what is surround sound. You're probably not familiar with this, so I'm not sure how attractive the title has been, but I assure you it's going to be a really interesting session. So after we go through the definition, I'm going to show you like how I use surround sound at HubSpot, how we track and measure our results for this program, and I'll give you some resources and other kind of like free goodies, things that I think you should kind of check out after the session. So let's dive right into it with a look into what is surround sound. Before we kind of go into the exact definition, I think it's really important to understand what the customer journey looks like right now. When I started at HubSpot, and I think even way before that, I would look at the customer journey as a very linear process. We would think about people going kind of like through awareness and then consideration and then the decision making, and then, you know, kind of like after that they make the purchase, and that's kind of how the whole process looks like. But nowadays, the way people shop and the way they evaluate their options online has radically changed, and the customer journey doesn't look at all like the image I've just shown you. In fact, because we're absolutely bombarded with a wealth of options and opportunities, we kind of tend to react completely differently, right? Because we have like so many options, we kind of have to like find ways to filter through all of that noise, I guess, and find the best solution for ourselves. This kind of process and this new customer journey has been studied in depth by Google, and this is one of the resources that I would really recommend. They've made a study on customer journey and specifically this decision-making process that they call the messy middle. That is basically right now people, instead of kind of going very linearly through like looking at their options, they kind of go into a buying process in a way they kind of go back and forth between different options. They like look for you know price comparisons. They ask for information from peers. They look at what influencers or thought leaders in their space kind of recommend. And kind of like this whole process is because it's not linear at all. This is why Google calls it the messy middle. And I think it's a really good definition of, it's a really good metaphor, I guess, for how the customer journey looks right now. Just to kind of give you the definition of this, how Google sees it, the messy middle is a space of abundant information in a limited choice, right? So this is where people kind of like look at all of the options and try to find shortcuts and ways in which they understand what's the best solution for them. So at the end of the day, they can make a purchase decision that they're very happy with. To go a little bit more deeper into how the messy, like what's going on in that messy middle, you have to think about that there are two types of actions that people take when they're trying to make a purchase. First of all, they go into the exploration mode where they look at what options are available out there, and then they evaluate those options. And sometimes they just kind of go back and forth into between exploration and evaluation, right? So they see, oh, they have these two types of, they find two types of running shoes that they really like, and they compare them, but maybe like neither one of them like completely satisfies them. So they go back into exploration mode and look for more options of running shoes and then evaluate those new options and so on. And to kind of highlight it even more, like how important this process is and like finding the best options for ourselves is, I've found this chart that I found really interesting in Google Trends, when it shows like how the searches for keywords, including best, has evolved over the past 15 years. The other blue line that's kind of remained constant, actually dropping a little bit, is cheap. So if we think about it, when we started using Google and other search engines, we were like looking very much at, trying to find the cheapest option, like the best price. But now, because we have so many options and most of them are available online, it's not only about the price. We're not only looking at buying the cheapest option, but we're looking at finding the best option for our needs. And this search for best option is what Google calls the messy middle. I think this is a really good I guess metaphor for this whole process, because finding the best option means, in one sense, getting recommendations from peers or friends, and they might recommend like things that they consider to be the best. Then you might go into like looking at what other people that you don't know, right, say about those products. You go into review websites, you look for a list like best CRMs or best events to attend, I guess, in Eastern Europe. And through this process, you kind of like arrange all of your options and evaluate them. Obviously, look at what other influencers and thought leaders think about or recommend as the best product. And it's not only Google that talks about this process. There are also other like really good thought leaders and resources that I really advise you to look at. Growth Lab is one of them, and they say that the more people hear about your product from different sources, the more likely they are that they will at least consider it, if not even purchase that product or service, just because they kind of hear about it from everywhere they look. They see that product or service mentioned. Then if this part has been a little bit too theoretical, I want to show you an example. And this example kind of illustrates the way I look at the purchase decision for HubSpot products. For those of you that are not really familiar with HubSpot, we're a software company. We're a CRM company that kind of serves a lot of functions in a company. So we have like a marketing automation tool. We've got like a sales a platform with like lots of useful tools, a service platform. But I guess now one of our main products is the CRM, which is free forever. And it's been one of the products that I've been like working on quite a bit ever since I started at HubSpot about 4 years ago. So that's why I chose this example, because I know it so well. So I think about the purchase process to a new CRM as, thinking about the guy, Larry, who is looking to get a new CRM for his SMB, for a small medium company. What he's going to do probably is going to start by asking his friends or his peers, so people that work in his space, to give him some recommendations. Like ask them, what kind of CRM are you guys using and what is your opinion? Like, would you recommend it? Would you say that I look for something else, etc.? So after he kind of gets these preliminary recommendations, he then goes into maybe like search engines and looks for options there. So he might like use queries like best free CRM, best CRM for small medium businesses, and so on. And once he's got like this list of options that he may have, he might go into review websites to check out what other users are saying about the CRMs that he's interested in. And he kind of goes back and forth through this process between exploration and evaluations of the potential options until he finally makes a purchase decision. So the joke, I'm hoping he would choose HubSpot CRM. It's free anyway, but I just wanted to illustrate to you like how I think about the purchase decision for our software tools. So I guess at this point, I think it kind of, I hope it's very clear what surround sound is. At HubSpot, we call surround sound the plethora of strategies and tactics that aim to make HubSpot products visible every time someone is looking for products such as ours, whether they're like using search engines to look for product related keywords such as best CRMs, or kind of in review websites and so on. To give you an even more specific example, this is how the top 10 result Google search results page looks like for free email marketing. You're going to see there that we're already ranking towards the bottom of the page with our own product page. So our own free email marketing tool ranks for this content, which is very important because you want to like first make sure that your website is ranking. And second of all, a bit above that, you'll see that there is a list of 12 best free email marketing tools in 2020. That's a blog post from HubSpot, where obviously our tool is the #1 solution. But there are 3 other solutions that, 3 other results where HubSpot is mentioned, and those are the result of our surround sound efforts. So whether they might be like affiliate, or we've like talked to those companies and found a way in which we could partner and get HubSpot listed on those existing articles that are already ranking for those terms. That is also like one of the results of surround sound. So if you want to look at surround sound in terms of like tactics, this is kind of like how I would create a roadmap for your own program, right? First, I would make sure that I think about the customer as like the center piece of my program. Like, think about like how does my potential customer look for products or services such as mine? Like what kind of keywords he might be using, like what are the places what he might be looking for options, where would he evaluate those options, etc. And then I would make sure that I rank with my own content, whether that's a blog or the product or service page, for those keywords that are relevant for my customer in his exploration and evaluation phase. And then I would make sure that my website, my products or services are visible in review websites, on third-party websites that rank really well for the keywords that I'm interested in. So whether that's blogs or news websites. And obviously I would try to build a network of partners, potentially affiliates, but they could be like, different other forms of partnerships as well, where HubSpot is, or your products and services are mentioned. So going back to the results page that I showed you earlier, you will see here that some of these results are some of these pages that rank for free email marketing and mention HubSpot were the result of some kind of surround sound partnership, whether it was an affiliate or whether it was just a content partnership that resulted in adding HubSpot to the existing list that was already ranking for those terms. So hopefully by this point you are really interested in building your own surround sound program for your company, and like kind of start thinking about how you might be present where people are searching for products and services such as yours. So in order to kind of help you out in that direction, I thought I would share with you my own process for building a surround sound program. So let's get started. Here is the surround sound program, like the way I built the surround sound program at HubSpot. First off, I started with a keyword research, maybe because I've got the background in SEO, but also because I'm thinking a lot about like how people are looking to purchase products such as ours online, I kind of want to start with finding the most representative, I call them product exploration keywords. So things that people would use, expressions they would use to find products and services such as yours, whether that's best or top products or services such as yours or alternatives to. This is the first step of the surround sound program. Just map all of these keywords and look at maybe their search volume, the difficulty, and so on. Then I look for opportunities to make the company more, or the products more visible for these keywords. I call that like looking for opportunities, and then prioritize those lists. So if you're just kind of getting started here, I would just list all those keywords and look at the top 10 or top 20 search results that appear for those keywords, and look for places where your product or service is not yet mentioned. Those are your opportunities. If you want to, you can also prioritize which one of these like lists, where your product or service could potentially be mentioned, should be first on your outreach or the partnerships that you're trying to build list. At HubSpot, I use a Serp Tracker, so I automate this process just because I'm looking at hundreds of keywords at the same time. But again, this is something that you can do manually as well, or using one of the tools in your SEO toolbox. Once I have my list of priorities mapped out, then I think about how I want to reach out to those people and what is the type of partnership that I want to build with them. Kind of strategizing my outreach a little bit. And to make things like really easy to track, I use the HubSpot CRM to build up the pipeline with my opportunities. Obviously, you feel free to check out HubSpot CRM if you're looking for like a free tool, or if you already have something in your toolbox, that's gonna work just as well. Then I try to book a meeting with those people that manage the results where I feel like HubSpot products could be mentioned. That is because during an actual meeting, whether that's Zoom right now, and you can't really like meet with people face to face, then that's the best way to really understand what is that person's or that business's goal, how we could potentially work together, what are the best ways in which we can collaborate. And doing that like over emails for myself personally feels a little bit clunky, and we don't really get to actually connect and like form a long-term partnership. So that's why I would always recommend getting to know the people that you work with through a meeting. Then I started actually implementing the partnership, and that partnership, because we're talking about adding a product or service to a pre-existing list, should result in some sort of like content promotion type of partnership, content exchange maybe. I work with affiliates quite often, or even I work with people on content creation, whether that's on HubSpot blog or on a partner's website. And last but not least, I make sure that I measure and track all of my results. I use an automated tool called the Serp Tracker, which I'm going to talk to you about a little bit later, and also Google Data Studio report to make all of that data that I'm looking at easy to understand for our stakeholders. But whether you're doing this like you're just getting started and you're like looking at things manually, I would still make sure that you kind of track the small steps, or like the small improvements that you make through your efforts. Now, I want to take a little look at each one of these steps that I've shown you, and maybe kind of give you a few insights of like how you could get started. For example, with keyword research, I'm a big fan of Ahrefs, but obviously you can use any other tool that you have in your toolbox. I can't, so I would give a big shout out to SEO Monitor if you're an agency. That's something you want to look into. SEMrush is another great tool, and there are plenty of options out there. If your background is in SEO, you probably already have something in your toolbox. The idea is to kind of start with, I guess, the way you expect people to search for your products, and kind of try to get some more recommendations of like what other keywords would be relevant to add to your list. If you're just getting started, I would say you can think about it. There are three main types of keywords that people could use to find product and services such as yours or compare them. First, they're going to look at what options are available across the market. So they're going to look at things like, language learning apps or free CRM, just kind of like look at what options are out there. Then they want to see what recommended solutions are. So this is the part where they evaluate potential options. So they look for best language learning apps or best CRM tools, best free email marketing tools, and so on. And thirdly, if they're in the position where they already use a tool, but they want to change it, they're going to look for things like alternatives to, best Duolingo alternatives, best MailChimp alternatives, best HubSpot alternatives, and so on. So these are the 3 types of keywords that I would look for in the beginning and start to form my list. Then I would make sure that I bucket those keywords into topics. Whether those topics are, let's say, for email marketing, for our email marketing tool, that's our tool is in a sense a topic, right? Because people might use different types of keywords to get to a product such as HubSpot. So all of these keywords that are related to email marketing, I bucket them into free email marketing. And then all of those features that are related to marketing, I bucket them into the Marketing Hub topic. The reason why I make sure that I have everything kind of bucketed is because at the end of the day, you want to make your life easier when it comes to measuring success. You want to obviously look how you improve per keyword, and maybe some keywords are going to be more important than others, but you also want to look at how working on these different keywords is impacting at the end of the day the visibility of your product, which is like a topic. Right, so this is kind of a tip to make sure that you set yourself up for success from the very beginning, and you make your life easier when it comes to measuring that success. All right, and then you want to figure out what your opportunities are just based on this preliminary research. So let's say I have a list of 3 keywords. One is CRM providers, sales management tools, and enterprise CRM. All of these keywords people would use to find product or services such as HubSpot, right? Then look at the search volume for all of these keywords, and then I look at how many of the results of the top 20 results in Google for CRM providers mention HubSpot. So I see that 7 results out of 20 mention HubSpot, and then I kind of calculate this, what I call a visibility score, and which is 7 divided by 20, 35%. Now obviously this visibility score is very basic as a calculation, and I recommend you to start with that because you want at first to kind of make more progress and not put a lot of calories and time into the measuring system. But if you're already doing something like this and you want to kind of have a more advanced measuring system, you can take into consideration the search volume, you can take into consideration the position of your product or service in a particular list or a list of recommendations and so on. But just for the purpose of getting started, I would suggest you measure the visibility score just like that, by counting the number of mentions in top 10 or top 20. So I talked about visibility score, and then in order to prioritize and figure out what's the opportunities, I have this formula that I use that doesn't really give you a super, I guess a typical number, typical metric. I just look at what percentage of the search volume we're missing, we're not present for. Think about it as a number of impressions. So for CRM providers, I multiply the visibility score that I'm missing, where I want to be present, right? It's 65% to the total search volume, and I see on what percentage of, I guess, the entire search volume, what's the number of impressions that I'm missing. So my opportunity would be 110. Now, again, this is not a extremely useful for other projects type of metric, but for this, for Surround Sound in particular, it's going to help you really prioritize your list of keywords based on your opportunity. And then once you have the list of the opportunities based on keywords, you also look at where your product or service is not already mentioned, and you have a list of all of the websites that you could potentially work with. As I said, I use HubSpot CRM to track all these partnerships, much like a sales process. I have a pipeline that I use. where I look at like, all the companies that I reached out to, with whom I'm meeting, what's the progress of each partnership, and so on. This is more of a project management tip, but I thought it would be useful to know how it would handle like a large volume of potential partnerships that you're working with. And then for the next step, let's say you've already started talking to people, you've had meetings with potential partners, then you want to like start implementing your strategy. And you have about like two options mainly, I guess. One is content creation, where you like produce new content, whether on your website or with a partner, like in this example, with best CMS software that I published on a partner's website. And you want that content to rank in top 20 or top 10 for the keywords that you're interested in. That would make your product, automatically visible. And the other option is, to kind of find some way in which you can partner with websites that already rank for the keywords that you're looking for and mention your product and services in that list. Now, I would also suggest like try not to kind of go for the gold or for the Oscar in the first place, because if your brand is kind of still growing, or it's not as visible in that space yet, you might not, it's a harsh word, but might not deserve the #1 position in a particular list. But just being there and being kind of visible is going to start making a difference. Like even in this example, best CMS software, well, HubSpot has a really good CMS, and we're making it better day by day. It's still not the top CMS, like the legacy, I guess, best CMS out there. So even in this list, they'll work with a partner to create this content. HubSpot is, I don't know, probably around like 4th or 5th position after other more established brands. But as you can see in the right chart, where I calculate a visibility score for HubSpot CMS, over time, start seeing kind of progress happening for that. And that's what, at the end of the day, you're aiming for, progress. And it would help you to kind of understand like what we've managed to do at HubSpot with surround sound. What I can share with you is that right now in October, about 50% of all the websites and pages that mention HubSpot and rank for the keywords that we're looking for are a result of some sort of partnership that we built with that company, whether that's like an affiliate partnership, whether that's being promoted on a review website, whether that's having HubSpot content ranking in top 20 or our product pages, some other sort of content partnership. Those are there because of our surround sound efforts. So now that we kind of went through like the whole process, the last part that I want to talk to you about is the tracking and measuring of your results, which I feel like it's as important as kind of going through like a really healthy process. Because if you're tracking your results correctly and you're like seeing the improvements you're making, you're going to be able to like get maybe more stakeholders involved in your project, and just a lot more satisfaction that your efforts are paying off. In order to measure the results, I would say this depends a lot on like how many keywords you're measuring, you're monitoring. If you're just getting started, I would suggest start with like a list of up to maybe 10 keywords and go through the process of finding opportunities and tracking results manually, maybe in spreadsheets or whatever other tool you want to use, but it's going to be a lot of like manual work into it. At HubSpot, because I'm monitoring about 500-600 keywords per month that are relevant to our product, I could not be doing this manually. So one of my colleagues, Alex Burkett, has actually built from scratch in R a tool to measure the surround sound visibility. And that's because as far as we've searched, there are no tools out there that do this right now. So if you want to take a glimpse at his tool or try to build something very similar, he's been kind enough to actually publish on GitHub the source of the tool, so you can kind of copy that and improve it, make it your own, and start tracking your results. You have the source in the slide if you need it. Now, the way this tool works is basically for each keyword that we're looking at, we crawl the top 20 results and look for mentions of URL that contain either HubSpot or HubSpot.com, and the tool calculates like based on the number of mentions that it finds, like what's the number of mentions and the visibility score, like the percentage of of mentions in top 20. And as I said earlier, at the end of the day, it's really important that you make those results relevant and visible for your stakeholders, whether those are your clients or the management that's responsible for giving you budget for different projects that you're running. I personally use Google Data Studio, so I connect the data that the Serp Tracker that I've just shown you pulls out to Google Data Studio, so I can kind of track, even at a keyword level, how we evolve over time. Then pulling all the data for all the keywords from that are representative for the topic HubSpot email marketing, then I see like an average visibility for our tool, so I know like we're making progress, how we're making like progress for a particular tool. And then, you know, at HubSpot, this is just kind of like the way our business is split, but we not only like have standalone products such as email marketing, but all of these like little marketing tools are part of bigger product, HubSpot Marketing Hub, and you know, we have different hubs, the Sales Hub and the Service Hub. So I look at the visibility at a hub level as well. This is like multi-keyword tracking. It's a bit more complicated to do it when you're like looking at hundreds of keywords, but if you're just getting started, you're very well off doing it manually. That's kind of how I did it when I first started the program. So we're quite at the end of our session. Hope this has been useful for you so far. I have a few things that I think you should take away from our conversation today. And that is, first of all, if you want your products or services to be considered when consumers weigh their options, when they, you know, think about what they might buy, you want to be visible where they search for those options. And also you want to be visible where it matters, right? So not only where they look for options, but also when they evaluate options. So be present in best CRM, best email marketing, best running shoes list. Be present in comparison articles, be present in review websites. At the end of the day, whether they're going to choose your product or service is going to be depending a lot on what their needs are, what they're trying to achieve. But it's always good to be top of mind and make sure you're part of their decision process. If you want to get started with this program, you want to start by mapping out all of the keywords that people are using to get those recommendations or evaluate different products. And then you want to make sure that you create and optimize content for those keywords. So you make sure that your own website, your own properties are visible for those keywords that you're targeting. And then move on to building partnerships, whether that's building a network of affiliates, being part of review websites, etc., etc. And last tip of the day, I guess, is make sure you always track and measure your results. So you make sure you kind of keep an eye on the progress you're making, and you report that in a way that is relevant for your stakeholders. And in terms of resources, I really recommend checking out the 3 articles that me and Alex Burkett have written for the HubSpot blog around surround sound. We talk there in depth about like how we think about the strategy, how we implemented, what results we've seen. The 3rd part might be out this week or in the next week, I'm not sure, but keep an eye out for it. And from other sources, I would really recommend checking out the Messy Middle report from Google and the Ultimate Guide to Digital Marketing from Growth Lab, which also kind of talks about how people shop these days. So you kind of get a bit more insights into the new customer journey. That's all I had for you today. Thank you very much for listening and for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your sessions.